yet, yeah. I'm always uncomfortable. On the one hand, people expect me to get into some of these strategic issues, because that's what we do. And yet, I'm always uncomfortable because we spent a good part of the evening talking about nuclear warheads and this and that. I don't want us to leave that way. So what I usually do, I throw this at the end because it's really the climactic finish. Because what we really want to talk about is our coming King, right? I'm indebted to a pastor in San Diego that gave me this idea. From something he did, gave me this idea. I've done it my own way now, but I want to tell you about my King. You know, I tell you where I do this. I often get invited to do a prayer breakfast or speak at a political thing, and they never invite me back, you know, because I point out I'm not a Republican or a Democrat. I'm a monarchist, and I want to tell you about my candidate. He's a king. He is a racial king. He's a racial king. Yes, he's a king of the Jews. You know, we as Christians forget that. His name is Yeshua, and he's also a national king. We forget this too. Most churches in America don't understand that he's coming back to take the throne of David. That's what Gabriel promised Mary. That throne did not exist in the day of his ministry. And he's, of course, king of all the ages, king of heaven, king of glory, and king of kings. And the real issue tonight is, do you know him? Not do you know about him, do you know him? He was a prophet before Moses. He was a priest after Melchizedek. He was a champion like Joshua. He was an offering in the place of Isaac. He's a king from the line of David, a wise counselor even above Solomon. He was beloved, then rejected, and then exalted son like Joseph. And yet far more. The heavens declare his glory, and the firmament show his handiwork. He who is, who was, and always will be. He's the first and the last. He's the Alpha and the Omega. He's the Aleph and the Tau in the Hebrew, or the A to the Z in our alphabet, if you will. He's the first fruits of them that slept. He's the Ego I Me, the Ichyach Asher Ichyach, the I am that I am. He's the voice of the burning bush. He said so in John 8. He's the captain of the Lord's host. He was the conqueror of Jericho, despite what the popular musical says. Read the last few verses of Joshua 5. He's enduringly strong, entirely sincere, eternally steadfast. He's immortally graceful, imperially powerful, impartially merciful. In him dwells the fullness of the Godhead bodily. The very God of very God. He's our kinsman redeemer, but he's also our avenger of blood. That coin has two sides. And of course, he's also our city of refuge. He's our performing high priest, our personal prophet, our reigning king. He's the loftiest idea in literature, the highest personality in philosophy, the fundamental doctrine of theology, and he's the supreme problem in higher criticism. He's the miracle of all the ages and the superlative of everything good. You and I are the beneficiaries of a love letter. That love letter was written in blood on a wooden cross erected in Judea some 2,000 years ago. They say he was crucified on a cross of wood, yet he made the hill on which it stood. By him were all things made that were made. Without him was not anything made that was made. And by him are all things held together. What held him to that cross? It wasn't the nails. At any time he could have said, enough already, I am out of here. What held him to that cross is his love for you and me. Staggering. I heard a presentation in Yorkshire. Joe Foch from Philadelphia and I, we were in a conference there, and he made a presentation that I just have to share with you briefly. His son went to the hospital covered with blood with an accident once, and he fought through the paperwork people to get him into emergency. In fact, he told me, if you don't get him in emergency, you're going to need emergency. But he dramatized this first because as the father concerned for his son. And as he expressed all that, he pointed out something I had never thought about in my 50 years of study. Have you ever thought about the crucifixion of Christ from the point of view of the Father? Can you imagine a father watching his son spit upon, insulted, torn apart, flogged so he no longer looked human, nailed to that cross? From the point, the willingness of the Father to allow that to happen. We always think of the love of Jesus Christ. Indeed, don't let me in any way diminish that. It never occurred to me the passion of the Father enduring that so that you and I could live. Staggering. He was born of a woman so that we could be born of God. He was humbled himself so that we could be lifted up. He became a servant so that we could be joint heirs with him. He suffered rejection so that we could become his friends. He denied himself so that we could freely receive all things. He gave himself so that he could bless us in every way. He's available to the tempted and tried. He blesses the young. He cleanses the lepers. He defends the feeble. He delivers the captives. He discharges the debtors. He forgives the sinners. He franchises the meek. He guards the besieged. He heals the sick. He provides strength to the weak. He regards the aged. He rewards the diligent. He serves the unfortunate. And he sympathizes and he saves. His offices are manifold. His reign is righteous. His promises are sure. Don't ever let anyone tell you that Allah is the Old Testament God in Arabic. Allah is not the name for God, it's the name for the God, and it's the moon god. Allah is presented by the Quran as one who can do anything. He's capricious. You're never sure of anything. Read that on Trustworthy. The God of Abram, Yitzhak, and Yaakov is a God who delights in making and keeping his promises. You notice the presentations of God in the Old Testament and the presentation of Allah in the Quran are opposites. No, Islam is satanic. Anyway, his goodness is limitless. His light is matchless. His grace is sufficient. His love never changes. His mercy is everlasting. His word is enough. And his yoke is easy and his burden is light. I wish I could describe him to you. He's indescribable. He's incomprehensible. He's irresistible. He's invincible. The heaven of heavens cannot contain him, and man cannot explain him. The Pharisees couldn't stand him, but soon learned they couldn't stop him. Pilate, the personal representative of the ruler of the world, couldn't find fault with him. The witnesses couldn't agree against him. Herod couldn't kill him. Death couldn't handle him. The grave couldn't hold him. He has always been and always will be. He had no predecessor, and he'll have no successor. You can't impeach him, and he ain't going to resign. His name is above every name, that at the name of Yeshua, every knee shall bow, and every tongue shall confess that Jesus Christ is Lord. His is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever. Amen. God bless you.